Okay, so I think we can start the session now. Shall we go ahead?
Yeah, sounds good to
Yeah,
me.
okay. So first of all, thanks a lot, Chandrika, for taking our time for conducting this session for pragmatic leaders. And thanks everyone for joining us in this product talk series. Uh, so before we start today's session, I would like to give you all a little brief about pragmatic leaders. Uh, so at Pragmatic Leaders, you all are part of global family of aspirational professionals who proactively help each other and are invested in each other's career growth. Pragmatic Leaders functions like a full stack global career accelerator that rests on three core pillars. Pillar one is educate. We help you upskill via proven courses and scientifically backed pedagogy. Uh, we run multiple job guarantee programs for folks looking to transition into product role and for existing product managers who are looking to upskill or looking to gain something in product management. And we have recently launched another platform called True Merit. This is a lifelong learning platform where you will be able to learn through live real world case studies. You can solve unlimited case studies and learn from global real world mentors like Chandrika and lot more. So we are soon going to announce this. And apart from this, second pillar is engage. We run a global community of product managers of Slack on Slack at the moment, and soon we are going to start another community on True Merit. And pillar three is employ, with over 79% placement success rate and 700,000 cumulative salary savings. We are the only one who run job guarantee programs in product management. And we are the only one who run job guarantee programs in product management. So you can go to our website and check out our exclusive program called PG Diploma Program in Product Management. That's all from my side. Uh, Now let's begin the session. So you all know about Chandrika. So far, she's working with DocuSign as a senior PM. She has worked with Nike. She has worked with Google as a principal. Sorry, as a product marketing manager. And today she is going to share her insights on how to crush your first 90 days as a PM. So I would like you to hand over the session, Chandrika.
Thanks, Piyush. Thanks for that intro. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here, and thank you for spending time this evening, this morning, this afternoon, depending on where you are. So, as Piyush mentioned, today we're going to talk about how to spend your first 90 days as a product manager effectively. And all of these are learnings based on my own experience and speaking to peers that went through this process, this onboarding process as a product manager. And I'll tell you a little bit of an origin story about how I came to learn about this and why we decided to start publishing a newsletter that was focused on helping product managers learn more about how to be an effective product manager. So, to start with, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Chandrika. I'm currently a senior product manager at DocuSign. Um, I would imagine a lot of you are familiar with what DocuSign does and what the product is, but to just give you a little bit of context, DocuSign is an cloud agreement company, and we're focused on managing the life cycle of an agreement. E-signature is our most popular product. DocuSign started back in 2003 with an e-signature product, and it was the industry defining product when it started. And over the course of time, DocuSign now has a suite of products across the life cycle of a contract. I'm focused on the e-signature product, and specifically within that, I work on growth and adoption for our self-service segment. Um, and just to back up a little bit and give you context into how I landed where I'm at today, I graduated from BITS Pilani in India back in 2011. Sounds like a while ago. And from there, I started working. I started working in management consulting. I spent about 4 years of my career beginning with management consulting. Then I moved on to product marketing and spent about 2 years working in product marketing at Google, focused on the YouTube ads product in the India market. And it was a very exciting time to be working on a product like that because a lot of connectivity and access issues were getting solved in India. And so, as a result of that, one of the things that we saw was there was a huge spike in video consumption. And being a product marketing manager for YouTube ads at that time was a really exciting project. It was a challenging role, but it was something that taught me a lot. While working in my role as a product marketing manager, I had a chance to work with a few product managers, and I thought that that role sounded really exciting. The skills that I'd acquired in my time in consulting and a little bit that I'd learned in my time in product marketing seemed to fit well with what I thought would be the skills required for product management. And I also wanted to be in tech. I knew that if I wanted to make an impact on the vision and the strategy of the product, I needed to be in a product management role. So that was one of the motivations behind me going to pursue my MBA. I spent the next 2 years getting my MBA from MIT Sloan in Boston, and that was a really exciting time. I learned a ton in my time there, and then I spent my summer between my first and second year working at Nike as a digital product manager on their suite of digital apps. I was focused on Nike Training Club, which is a guided video workouts app. I hope some of you have used it. It's a really, really fantastic product, and I got a chance to work on that, which was a pretty great opportunity, and it really reinforced my belief in that I wanted to spend more time learning more about product management and working in product management in the near future. So once I graduated from business school, I decided to pursue product management full time, and I had the fortune of starting my journey at DocuSign in 2019. And so here I am, and I'm currently a senior product manager. Some of the things that I'm really passionate about are mentoring and promoting specifically women in product development. And outside of work, a few of my newfound pandemic hobbies include mountain biking. I've recently picked that up and really excited about that. So right after this call, I'm actually going to go on a bike ride. And I'm just gonna mute, I guess, whoever's unmuted. So that's a little bit about my background, and now I'm gonna start talking about how to use the first 90 days as a product manager most effectively. As I mentioned, these are learnings that I've gotten from my own experience, but also talking to some of my peers. So in the process of onboarding, I started talking to a friend about like some of the challenges that I was facing, and what we came to a conclusion about was that there were a lot of resources out there that helped us break into product management, but we didn't find a lot of good resources out there that helped us onboard in our product management roles. So we decided to start publishing a newsletter. It's called howtopm.substack.com, and if you all are interested in learning more about what we talk about, please go ahead and subscribe to that. But yeah, so these are learnings that I gathered from my peers who are product managers in different roles across different companies across the industry. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a little bit of perspective into what are some of the things that you could do in your first 90 days as a product manager. Starting with the first one. So when you start working in a product management role, I believe there are lots of questions that you can start asking about the product, about the organization itself. But thinking about your rest of the journey, these are the top 6 questions that that we believe you could be asking, and not necessarily answering all of them on day one. It's almost impossible to answer all of these questions on day one, but it's important to start asking those questions early on. So to begin with, the first question being, what kind of problem are we solving for our users? Depending on the type of product you're working on, depending on whether it's a B2B product, B2C product, there would be different problems that you would be solving for your users. And I want to draw a distinction between customers and users at this point. Typically, users are the people who are using your product, and they can be the same as or different from your customers. Customers are folks who are paying for this product, especially when we think about a B2B context or enterprise SaaS products. Customers are usually different from the folks who are using the product, especially in larger organizations. The folks paying or making decisions about spending on a specific product could be folks in the IT department or legal department in our case, because we deal with a lot of agreements and contracts. So the folks paying for the product could be very different from the folks using that product. So I specifically emphasize your users because we want to know as product managers what are the problems that we're solving for our users. In my case, reflecting on DocuSign, we are saving our customers time and money by making that entire process of signing a contract, signing an agreement, a lot more convenient and simpler. We're replacing legacy paper-based contracts and removing the layer that is usually error-prone by being manual, and making sure that we're making that process a lot more convenient and automated. And in the process, we're also saving a lot of trees because we're replacing paper. So think about what are the different problems that you're solving for your users, and what problems resonate with your users when you think about the value proposition. The next one is, what do we know about our users? So as I mentioned, I specifically focus on our self-service segment, which means that these are folks that buy the DocuSign subscription off the shelf. They go on the website docusign.com/products and pricing page and look at the different plans. But there's also a whole other segment of users that a different team at DocuSign works on, which is our enterprise or direct sales customers. So these are customers who actually go through an account manager or a sales executive to buy a DocuSign subscription, and their journey looks different from the users who are self-service. So as I think about my product, I wanted to understand what are these self-service customers like in terms of demographics, what are the typically kind of functions they belong to, what geographies they are coming from. This is especially important if your product is a global product and if you're working across different geographies. Thinking about things like localization or language localization, essentially, when you're thinking about making any changes to the product, becomes really important if your users are spread across the globe. And then going one level deeper beyond just the demographics and thinking about what are the other things that you know about your users in terms of what are sort of the things that they would typically be doing in a day in their life. So if I focus on one segment of our customers, which is folks in HR who are sending a lot of offer letters typically, thinking about a journey or mapping a journey of what are some of the things that they would be doing throughout the day is really helpful in getting the context of what these users do and what do we know about them. Also, I wanted to mention, at any point, if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know there were a few questions that were submitted through the registration form, so I'll hopefully be able to answer some of these. And please feel free to unmute your mic and ask questions at any time. The next question being, sorry, did someone have a question? I guess not. The next question that I believe is really important to ask on the first day is, what are some of the key flows that your users go through in their journey within your product? So when I think about my specific product, typically users are coming to send documents to signers who are going to be then signing a specific contract or agreement. These flows could be very different depending on whether you're working on a mobile app, whether you're working on a web app, if it's a consumer-facing product, if it's a business-facing product. And so thinking about, let's say, a ride-sharing app, what are some of the key flows that the users go through in their journey? They are typically, first thing, they're signing up for that service. So they're signing up for the ride-sharing app, they're going through a signer flow, and then they're using their credit card for a payment method or any other sort of payment method, and they're connecting to a bank. Then typically they're going through, ordering a particular ride, or if they are looking for other services within the ride-sharing app, like a lot of things are integrated now with Uber and Lyft. So just taking that as an example, thinking about what are the key flows that users go through in the journey. In my specific case, this is one of the flows that I'd mapped out for a sender. So just the point of showing this is not to overwhelm you with the entire flow, but to tell you like the depth into which I'd gone in. And in the first month that I started working here at DocuSign, I spent about 2 to 3 hours every single day in the product and just going through all these key flows to understand what are some of the areas that seem to have more friction, that the team who had been working on the product had become almost blind to because they had been so deep into it, and me having that fresh perspective was able to spot some of the areas which needed to be resolved, needed to have less friction as we keep going. So this is an example of just one of the flows, one of the key journey flows that I'd mapped. Moving forward, the fourth question that I believe is really important to ask is what are some of what are the channels that you as an organization use to understand the voice of your users? So this can come through many different forms, right? There are a lot of products that have popular CEOs or executives who get tagged on Twitter all the time about feedback. So that's also one channel. And then there are channels that are built within the product. So there are NPS surveys, there are post signing page surveys, there are surveys built within the product. There are also channels like App Store reviews or Play Store reviews, depending on whether you have a mobile app or not. So just making sure that you're getting those signals and understanding what are the different channels that you use to understand the voice of your users is really important, because at the end of the day, your roadmap or the product features that you're going to build is going to depend on what your customers need the most. So in addition to doing user research, where you'd typically be speaking to folks in a focus group discussion or doing a study with them, it's also important to just monitor the different channels through which your users are sending you feedback. Customer support. Customer support is a really important team within an organization to partner with for product managers, because they get a bunch of tickets and they get a bunch of like requests from customers who are typically pissed off about one thing or another, and if it's a paid product, typically asking for refunds and things like that. So it's really important to understand what are these customers, where are they experiencing the most friction in the product, so that you can go ahead and think about a way for solving that. The next question is, who are the stakeholders involved in making this product successful? And this is a little bit of internal organizational reflection that you would have to do. When you start out in an organization, there's obviously a dynamic that exists within the organization before you join, and it's really important to understand who are the different players in that dynamic, and what is sort of their status within the organization, how much influence they have over this product. So in the first few weeks, it's really important to just draw almost a map of like power versus influence. I'm an ex-consultant, so think about, I think in terms of 2x2 matrix a lot. But yeah, just as an exercise, I found it really helpful to just map the different folks within the organization, different stakeholders that you would be working with, and making sure that you understand what is sort of the power they have and what is their influence within the organization, and how do you need to work with them, how do you need to align with them frequently to make sure that you are successful in your role. And lastly, this is a really important question, and I feel if there was one question that you were to ask on day one, this would be the most important one, which is, what are some of the quick wins that you can get to establish your credibility in the organization? These things don't have to be a deep, extensive product problem, but anything that you can do quickly to show that you are able to deliver, that you're able to get things done. Because as a product manager, a lot of what you deliver is dependent on how well you can get things done. So for example, one of the first projects, or one of the earliest projects that I worked on here at DocuSign, it had very little to do with solving a complex customer problem or user problem, but it had more to do with how well I could rally different teams and get something done. So my first project involved getting a survey to show up on one of the pages, and it was a very well cut out problem. I didn't have to go through understanding the user pain point or doing any research. It was a task that I needed to get done, and I had to identify who were the different stakeholders involved in getting that done and what was the impact that it had on other areas that I had to make sure I had to keep everyone who could be impacted by something like that in the loop. So um, it was at the beginning kind of a challenging task, even though it sounds so simple. It was a challenging task because I didn't know who were the people who could get that slotted into their roadmap, or I had to follow up relentlessly with some of the teams to make sure that this was prioritized on their roadmap, because I didn't have a dedicated engineering team right away when I started working on a product. So depending on your situation, it could be different, but it's really important to just figure out how well you can get at least one thing done. And what that'll help you is just earn that credibility. And I found out like months later that, getting that project done, this like survey to show up, actually helped me earn a lot of brownie points, and it established my reputation in the organization as someone like you needed to have on your project if you wanted to get things done. And so that goes a long way in just making sure that your credibility is established fast. So these are some of the questions that you would ask on day one. Not necessarily get everything answered on day one, but these are things that you need to start asking yourself as soon as you start working on a product. The next thing that's really important, especially in a product management role, is cultivating great work relationships with your colleagues and coworkers. And product management is such a cross-functional role. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, oh, you're the CEO of the product, or you have to work without having as much authority, but you have to influence other people, and all of that is true in its own context. But what's I think common across any product, any organization that you work in, is just making sure that you are able to cultivate great work relationships with folks that you're going to be working on. There's lots of studies out there that show that people love to work with someone who's warm, who's personable. So just understanding how you can put your best foot forward and cultivate great relationships is really important. So starting with the first one, which is coffee chats. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about how it's important to set up coffee chats in the first few weeks of your starting at an organization, and that's true. You must speak to pretty much anyone and everyone that you can get to work with, and it's your chance to actually speak to folks in the senior leadership and try to learn from them, who are typically hard to schedule time with. Their calendars are so busy, but like as a new person, you should take advantage of that opportunity. But what would make this chat even more effective is just being deliberate about the outcome of these chats. Asking yourself, what is it that would make this conversation with this person successful? And trying to understand what their backgrounds are, like understanding what role they serve within the organization, where in the organization they sit, but also what their journey has been up until that point. So how did they land the role that they're in right now? What are some of the experiences they have had before? Another thing that's really important is spacing out these chats. I remember early on, I'd schedule some back-to-back chats, and back in the day when offices were in person, I was trying to just go around from one room to another, not knowing where things were located. So I think Zoom solved that problem a little bit, because you just have to log on and log off. But if things are in person, when things are in person, definitely make sure that you're spacing out these chats, because it can be hard to understand the layout of your workspace pretty early on. And it's important to start these chats a little bit later into your role, because typically your first couple of weeks, first few days will be spent on a lot of administrative work. You would be setting up different accounts, ADP for getting your pay slips, or setting up Concur for expenses or other things. So definitely take your time to do those administrative things, going through any kind of trainings that you have within your organization before you starting up these coffee chats, because it'll also help you form a mental model of what the product development org looks like. Oftentimes people would ask you, so what is your role, what are you working on? And in the first few days in an organization, you don't even know that typically. Like, I remember struggling to answer that question, because I was like, well, I'm a growth and adoption product manager. I don't really know what that means, and I'm not sure what projects exactly I'd be working on, because I haven't quite figured that out. So definitely take your time to set up those chats, because these first impressions are obviously important, and the more prepared you can be, the better it can be for you. Lastly, a pro tip that I got from one of my colleagues is always ask the person that you're chatting with to give you two more names of people that you should chat with, and continue that cycle till you sort of run out of people to speak to, right? And I think the more you can identify, where folks within an organization sit, what roles they have, how they can be helpful to you, or how you can be helpful to them, it just makes your rest of your time in an organization much easier. Moving on, asking the question about how can you help. So, like, pretty early on, it's really important to understand, what are some of the pain points that your co-workers have within the organization, and these could differ a lot. So, these conversations would be different depending on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to someone in senior leadership, if you're speaking to someone in middle management, if you're speaking to someone who's your peer, so these can differ quite a bit. I would say for conversations with senior leadership, what I found really helpful is just focusing on strategic conversations, focusing on what their vision for the organization overall is, and try to ask the questions about how they are planning to get to where they want the organization to go, like what their vision for the organization is, and find areas that you can start influencing pretty early on. So think about, if someone in sales team wants to get to an X million dollars worth of revenue by a specific time, a specific quarter. How can you start identifying those areas where you can help them optimize for revenue or optimize for cost? So thinking about, what are some of the pain points that someone in senior leadership currently has, and how you can start influencing those areas is key. Then the next type of co-worker that you'd probably be scheduling chats with is your manager, or someone in that middle management role, typically. And it's important to try identifying what are their responsibilities. So even when with your manager, try to understand what product areas they work on outside of your own area as well, and what are some of the challenges that they're facing across their portfolio, and how can you start helping early on. Ask to be added to meetings that you think are relevant, and you can be a fly on the wall. You don't have to participate, you don't have to speak early on because you don't have as much context, but just even being in these meetings, trying to understand what's going on, picking up on some of the terms that are internal is helpful. So just try and participate in these meetings as much as possible. And then coming to your peers, when you're speaking to your coworkers who are at the level of your peers, make sure that you understand what are some of the ceremonies or rituals or practices that exist within your organization, in terms of like planning, in terms of prioritization frameworks, etc. And what are things that your peers like or don't like about the existing practices, and try to come up with changes that you can introduce over a period of time. I would recommend not introducing a lot of change all at once because that's really hard and people don't want that. So try to introduce small changes one at a time and understand the impact of something that you've just done before you start introducing changes in many areas all at once. So that's just my recommendation on how you can help your coworkers. And lastly, it's really important to get to know your coworkers just outside of work as human beings. What do they do? What do they like? And that's also become especially important in this virtual setting when you don't have that space, when you don't have that forum to actually just have a water cooler conversation. So try to find forums that exist within the organization, whether your company uses Slack or Google Meets or Google Meet or Teams or something like that. Whatever platform, whatever communication channel you use, try to identify if you have groups that are just fun, casual, that can help you get to know your coworkers beyond work. I'm part of a running group at work, which is it's really exciting to just bond with coworkers on a passion because you get to know a different side of them. And then one of the things that I initiated that has been really exciting is just doing these viewing sessions of master classes with some of the folks on my team. So just like organizing things like that, being proactive about trying to build a culture within your team and trying to understand your coworkers beyond work just goes again a long way. I've spoken a lot, so I want to just pause and see if there are any questions before I move on.
Hey, Chandrika.
Hi.
Hi, Ajay here. So my background is finance and strategy consulting, but I find whatever you said so far very interesting. And I worked a lot of product managers, so it's definitely resonating. One thing I wanted to just touch with you is the left box, the coffee chats. We are all in virtual world, and we don't have the luxury to meet people casually anymore. And it for a new product manager, I'm thinking it might take weeks to sometimes schedule 30 minutes because calendars are tight and people are working on releases and all that. How do you suggest to get with somebody sooner, even if it's any bright spots, anything you worked with you because somebody would have reached you as a new product manager? Any thoughts would help?
That's a great question, Ajay. And I think a lot of times folks get stuck in this mental model of like you need a 30-minute chat. Honestly, sometimes having a 15-minute intro conversation is good enough. You don't have enough stuff to even talk about for 30 minutes. And getting those 15 minutes on someone's calendar, I would argue is like much easier to than getting like 30 minutes on someone's calendar, especially if you want to get someone's time whose calendar is blocked like 3 weeks in advance. It helps to just even Slack them or like ping them on whatever means of communication you use in your organization. Oftentimes I feel product managers or anyone who's starting out in an organization, people are afraid to reach out on Slack or an informal sort of channel for communication. But I found that when I'm on the receiving end, I actually really appreciate someone just like reaching out on chat and just telling me, hey, like I'd love to set up just some time for an intro chat. I see that your calendar is pretty busy for the next 3 weeks. Do you have any time in between meetings or 10 minutes, 15 minutes that we can just get a cup of coffee together or just chat? So I think that's been pretty helpful. Does that help answer your question, Ajay?
It does. And in fact, sometimes what I've heard back from executives who I wanted to schedule some time is, don't worry about scheduling time through my executive support. Just ping me towards end of the week and we'll figure out. Right? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Chandrika. Yeah, I had one more question. I'm Srinidhi. I am an early career product manager. Till now, I've been thoroughly enjoying your session. My question is along the lines of what are the suggestions to build a better relationship with the tech lead in the team? Like, how do you handle the segregation of work, determining the release timelines, and so on? When you don't have a project manager as such, like there is just me and the tech lead and the developers, QA, etc. So how do I understand the role better, segregation of work, and so on?
Yeah, as a product manager, the relationship with your tech lead is so important because you need to be in lockstep with them for everything. And you need to, make sure that they trust you, you trust them. So that's a really
Right.
important question you've raised there, Srinidhi. For tech leads, I've found that it's especially helpful to just make sure that you don't come across as trying to solve their problems, or sort of stepping over the line. Like there's a pretty discrete set of responsibilities that your tech lead will have and you as a product manager will have, and having that conversation early on, trying to just even shadow them in a few meetings, in a few conversations early on to understand how they work, what is their process, and trying to sort of adjust your way of working to theirs before you start
Right.
introducing any kind of change is very helpful. So that helps you earn their trust and also understand where the boundaries lie between your work and their work, because you could be someone who is from a technical background and understand what they're doing, but the expertise and the decision making ultimately lies with them. So just making sure
Right.
that you're clear on those boundaries and having those transparent communication and having that like conversation early on is typically pretty helpful.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so I'll move on to day 30 and then we can continue the Q&A. I see the time, it's 8:39, so I'll try to go through these slides quickly. One of the things that I've noticed in my time here at DocuSign and heard from like pretty much all my peers across different organizations and different roles is the important thing is to decide what not to build and not necessarily what to build. Typically, as a product manager, your backlog is flooding with ideas of, what someone in the organization feels that you should be working on, this new exciting cool feature that you can build to improve the experience of your customers, of your users, all the tickets that customer support sends your way. So there's a lot that you can do. What's important is just understanding how you prioritize and how do you decide what not to build. Here, what I've found is it's really important to understand what is the planning process in your organization. So to start with, I would say there's two buckets, almost distinct buckets, like understanding the planning processes and understanding if there is a prioritization framework that exists within your organization. If not, how can you introduce one, or what prioritization framework you could leverage. So starting with understanding the planning process. So for example, in my context, we have an annual planning process called OPP, and then we go through, this process every year where we think about, okay, for the next year, this is the stuff that we want to get done. These are the priorities. These are some of the projects that you want to deliver on, and then you break them down into quarterly, and then eventually, how you accomplish all of those things within a quarter. So it's a bottom-up process where different teams across the board will come up with their operating plan for the next year at an individual level, at a team level, and then this gets decided more at an organizational level where it goes to the senior leadership and it aligns with some of the priorities that they have set for the organization for the next year. The other thing to understand is how do you prioritize at a more granular level on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. So try to understand what kind of ceremonies exist in your organization, your team. What is the cadence for things like sprint planning, things like grooming, and then do you have retrospectives where you reflect on what you just did and how your last sprint went, and then what are some of the areas that you can improve upon. And it sounds it sounds like a no-brainer, but some of these practices are so important, and the magic usually lies in the practice. So just doing it once or twice is not good enough. Just making sure that there is a discipline about some of these things and you come prepared to all of these things is really important. In the first few days, obviously your role would be more to just observe what exists and how you can think about improving some of those things, especially bringing that fresh perspective that isn't biased yet. So think about just making sure that you understand some of the processes that exist. And lastly, the prioritization framework. So there are lots of frameworks out there. I would say this is one which is I'm gonna it's gonna sound like a cop out, but it is a very much depends on your situation kind of an answer. It boils down to doing like a cost benefit analysis in whatever framework that you use. I found there's a framework called Now, Next, Later, which I found specifically helpful, where you clearly define, okay, here are all the things that that we have in our backlog. Here are some of the things that these are immediate. These are things that we're working on now, and we're trying to solve for these problems in the next few weeks or months. The next things that we're going to do are, either iterating on some of the problems that you're going to solve or building on those depending on the type of results or impact you see. And that's sort of the next steps that you'll have. And then later are things that are, in product management speak, typically P3, P4 kind of issues. That's like the lower priority level issues that you have. And then these are typically enhancements. These are good to have things, not must have things. And you typically put them to a later stage so that that you're slotting them in and you have some time to get to them. And it's not always just like, putting down the fires, that you have things that are more urgent. There are lots of other frameworks out there. We've talked about a few on the newsletter that we publish, which is again howtopm.substack.com, and you would find different folks that we've spoken to had different frameworks that they used. But the one that I find pretty helpful is this Now, Next, Later framework. And then when you're brainstorming or trying to take on a new project, there's another framework that I've really enjoyed, which is called Jobs to be Done. Jobs to be Done framework is pretty helpful when you're trying to understand the user persona and you're trying to take on a completely new project and you're trying to drive alignment within the organization as well. So you all come together in the form of like a workshop where you involve folks across different teams, across customer success, across sales, marketing, across obviously product development within the organization would be involved, which is your UX team, your informational architecture team, your developers, of course, will be included in this, but it goes beyond your immediate organization and actually helps you understand what are some of the jobs that your customers or your users are coming to get done when they're using your product. And so that, like, narrowing it down and specifically focusing on one job that they're trying to get done and trying to solve problems around that is pretty helpful in pivoting the conversation and making it pretty focused. Any questions on this one? I'm going to move to day 60. All right. So next thing is preparing for a successful launch. So by now you've spent 2 months in your organization. You've hopefully prioritized one specific project, let's say, that you're taking on. And now you're, you've worked with your developers, you've worked with your design or UX team, if that's the kind of project you're taking on. And hopefully the first project that you're taking on is not a really long project, and it's like a small one that you can actually start delivering on in your second month within the organization. I would recommend this. Even if you are taking on big projects, I would just make sure that you sort of push to get a portfolio of projects. As a product manager, similar to how you think about investing, it's important to think about your product portfolio in a similar way. And have some risky bets, which can make you the superstar within an organization, can really bring you to spotlight, but they're high risk. And so it's always important to have a safe bet of projects that you're working on that you can deliver on instantly, that are more executional, or that require you to just deliver on something that's already been thought out. So I would recommend having a portfolio of products. And if your manager, or folks you work with, or whoever's dictating your product area and projects, if you get a chance to speak to them, and you're tasked to work on a project that seems pretty risky, it's a big bet, it's always exciting, but just make sure that you have something that you can deliver on pretty quickly. So preparing for a successful launch, this is pretty important. So just going through that entire cycle, I would say the first thing is defining the problem to drive alignment within the team. So now you've narrowed down to one project. So what is it that you're solving for a customer, and how can you drive alignment within the team, within different stakeholders that you're working with? Having a shared vision is so important. It just brings people together, and they are passionate about the problem that they're solving if they know what the impact of that problem is, if the impact of that solution is going to be. So making sure that you're driving alignment within your team from the get-go is really important. I have found another, I'm going to introduce another framework here, but I found this framework called How Might We, pretty helpful. You can just look it up on Google. It's a design thinking framework. So it goes like, how might we solve problem X for our customer Y that helps business, gain Z, or something like that. So it's a really important framework. It's pretty handy. It you start thinking about, okay, this is the customer problem, this is the business impact, this is the persona that you're choosing, and it makes the problem from a pretty vague, broad statement to a very narrow, focused thing that you're going to be solving. The next step is gathering requirements. So this is again very, very important. Spend your time gathering requirements and making sure that you have thought about edge cases, or thought about things that only a small segment of your persona that you've defined to solve this problem will face. But just make sure that your requirements are all buttoned up before you start, before the development team starts developing, especially. So this is where, depending on your type of product area, you could have UX help, or you might not, depending on whether you're a front-end focused PM or not. I focus a lot on the UI and front end, so I work with the product research team, the UX team a lot, to uncover some of the insights that they have from their past research, or if we need to commission a new study to understand some gaps that lie. And then UX team, if they have been around, are super helpful to just understand some of the flows that the team might have explored in the past to solve a specific problem, or if it's something that's completely new that hasn't been touched on at all. So you start gathering requirements like that first, and then making sure that if there are some business requirements that you need to balance with, how do you do that? How do you make sure that you're informing different teams on the impact that this particular feature or product launch could have on their areas? The next thing is, what do you do while engineering is building? So hopefully in this requirements phase, you've actually defined success metrics and the KPIs you're gonna measure the impact of this project against, right? So while the engineering team is building, oftentimes it's product managers' responsibilities to evangelize that product or feature within the organization. Make sure that you've communicated to different teams like legal, privacy. You have spoken to, if you have teams that are that are like specifically focused on press releases. If you have a PR team, make sure that you've spoken to them. If this is a feature of that scale, that's going to be public facing, that's going to be, changing the way your product behaves today. Definitely make sure you loop in, different teams that could help you with communicating this change internally and externally. Another thing that's extremely important is making sure that you have thought about accessibility. There's a lot of customers or users who would be using your product not in the typical way that you and I would probably imagine, but there are folks who are visually impaired and need specific type of product thinking behind that. For example, I don't know if a lot of you use the Robinhood app, but Robinhood has a specific mode for folks who are colorblind, so that you can distinguish between the green and the red, especially if you have the green and red color blindness. So thinking about things like that is really important to just make yourself go from a good to a great product manager. And so making sure that you are communicating across different organizations while engineering is building, and also take the time to set up dashboards to measure the metrics that you've defined in the previous phase. You could be using different types of measurement like instruments. Make sure that the telemetry exists in the product to give you the right signals to be able to measure the impact. We use Mixpanel, which is a self-serve tool. So what I typically do is I will go and create the funnels, create insights reports that will help me measure the impact of this particular feature launch or product launch, and just align on how we're measuring that with, if you have an analytics team or a data science team, or if you're the sole owner and if you have to run some Snowflake reports or some SQL query, just make sure that you have that all set up. And this is the stuff that you can do while engineering team is building the product. Now lastly, final checks to do before you make your product or feature go live. This is key. So make sure you're taking a phased rollout approach. The phased rollout could look different depending on the type of organization you're in, depending on the user base. So if your product touches billions of users, then you want to be extremely careful about rolling out any new thing and just making sure that you're not breaking. This is the phase which metaphorically you would check, like if the plumbing is fine, if the water is running through the pipes, and so that's the kind of final checks you want to do. If you're running an experiment, make sure you do like an AA test before you start an AB test, so you see that the traffic splitting is happening properly, it's randomized, and then when you have a phased rollout, either your organization will already have a cadence of releases, and you go with 5%, 25%, so on, before you roll out that feature to the entire user base. But think about, what is the type of impact that this could have, and what are some of the things that you want to look for. I've been in situations where we roll something and then, we expose that to 5% of our users, and we saw a bug. And this is after we went through rigorous testing. We did a UAT, we went through the different environments, test, stage, demo, production, and we didn't catch the bug up until production, and that happens every now and then. So make sure you're giving yourself that time to understand what is the impact that your feature is having, if it's breaking anything else in the product, because that's the last thing you want. So that's how I would say you prepare for a successful launch. And then the last thing, I know we're 4 minutes, so I'll just go over this quickly. It's important to just iterate on your product after you've gathered insights from the first launch. So you take your first product and see what the first launch looks like. You monitor the performance of your product or feature. This is, hopefully you've set the dashboards in your last phase and you have the right KPIs that you've aligned on. So it's important to keep monitoring the performance of your product once you've put it out there, and see what is, if the impact it's having on certain metrics that are being impacted negatively is within the threshold of what the teams sort of agreed upon that you're willing to sort of tolerate. If it's not, then communicate instantly to different teams and just understand whether you want to roll back that feature, you want to continue the test for a little bit longer to see how it impacts the product area, and make sure that you're communicating the impact quickly enough so that if there is a decision that needs to be made, that's being made pretty quickly. How do you decide whether the product works as is or if it needs any iteration? So yeah, I think I talked about this a little bit in the first one, which is you understand what are you anticipate some of the metrics that your product feature is going to have a negative impact on, and then you align with the team on what is the threshold that you have to tolerate some of that negative impact. And if it goes beyond that, then you already ideally have an agreement on how you want to operate in that scenario. Whether you want to pause the feature rollout, you want to just like keep it at 25% and observe it for a little bit longer, or you want to iterate on that before you roll it out any further. Next one, and this is my favorite. I feel like product research is the best defense mechanism you have against bad product decisions. So it's never too late to conduct research. If there are areas where you see that the product is not functioning as expected, definitely conduct post-launch user research. Oftentimes, we as product managers can't anticipate how our users are going to use a specific feature. A good example of that is we have a feature within our product called Power Forms, and while COVID was rising, the state of New York actually tweeted with a Power Form link to collect all the excess PPE that people had while there was a shortage of PPE. And that just spiked up the usage of our Power Forms like we'd never seen before. And we weren't prepared for that at DocuSign. So that was, a unique way that we'd not anticipated anybody using a Power Form and like tweeting a link to a Power Form and just like increasing the load on our system so much more than we'd ever anticipated. So just look out for any post-launch user research that you want to do. And lastly, this is again just being conservative with the rollout journey and making sure that you have a ramp up cadence and process that you've established, and making sure that you narrow down on the user groups included in each ramp. So whether you have different SKUs that you start with that are low risk, or depending on the product that you are in, whether you start with a geo or a specific region where you have a more loyal customer base that you think is going to be more tolerant. Think about those things and make sure that you have a ramp cadence defined. So that was pretty quick, but you can find all of this that I've just talked about on detailed blog posts that another friend of mine and I write regularly. It's a newsletter. You can subscribe to it. It's called howtopm.substack.com. So if you found any of this useful, you can hopefully find more such learnings through our constant regular posts that we do. And that's it. So I'm going to pause. I know we're out of time, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to stay back and answer a few of them.
Hi, Chandrika. Nice presentation. I just want to understand that how do you run A/B tests in a B2B in this product, for a B2B product?
I believe that A/B testing would be pretty similar whether you're on a B2C product or a B2B product. Of course, I think there are key differences in the way you run tests. Typically, like in enterprise SaaS, you'd have to have like an early access program or something of that sort where you get explicit consent from a set of customers who are willing to try out new products and give you feedback. So these are typically your loyal customers. You have them participate in a formalized way where you have an early access program for them, and you ask them If they're willing to give you feedback on some of the features that you're developing that are experimental, and you have like NDAs or other, consent forms signed with them, and then you release the feature in a beta stage, and you have them exposed to that particular feature using a flag or something that you're only there's an allow list and a deny list, so you have them in the allow list of that feature, and they're typically the ones who are getting early access to something.
I want to understand when if the if your client size is very low, say your client is a cola soft drink maker, or say a car maker. So they're like two cola soft drink makers. Like one is Pepsi and one is Coke, and even car manufacturers they're less. So in that scenario, how is it even feasible or possible to do a B/B testing in that scenario?
A/B testing is not something that you should do as a blanket, you should follow as a blanket approach in every scenario for sure. So it's not necessarily something that you should do. You have to think about your specific context, right? And so in your question about the cola maker, can you repeat that one more time, for sort of that example that you were giving me about the cola maker?
There are only two, say, organizations like Coke and Pepsi, which are there, right? So, and if you do even A/B testing with one of that, like 50% of the market, 50% of the customer base you're doing A/B tests with.
Yeah, well, I would say, like, if your client base is that small, then you have to develop the features in partnership with your customers. So, it's not something that you just created in vacuum without taking their input. So you in fact have to like just take their requirements and develop this particular feature in partnership with them, taking them along the journey, and just making sure that they are aware of each step. Okay, so here's some of the gaps, here are some of the challenges we have in developing this feature. If we did it a different way, would this serve your needs? Would this solve the problem that you're trying to solve? A feature is, at the end of the day, there to solve a specific problem. So there's many ways a specific problem can be solved, right? So working in partnership with your clients is really important, especially when your user base is small.
That's great. Now I have one more question. So I understand what product has. So you join a product which is already existing, and so and you see there are multiple features. So understanding what the features were meant to do and what were your use cases were like, and so how do you understand that?
What does the existing product look like? How do you understand that?
Yeah, and what the features which are already existing, what were supposed to did they attain their KPIs or matrices they were supposed to?
Yeah, I
So
think that's something that's really important, especially when you start working in an organization that's fairly mature, right? So that's where the whole idea of like going through different product flows, spending time in the product comes into play. So hopefully you can get access to different features if they are add-ons, if they are other SKUs that you have to pay for. You can use like a test credit card or something, and make sure that you, as a new product manager, have gone through different flows within different parts of the product, different features. So that's, I would say, pretty key. Once you have gone through that, you might be curious about specific features and how they perform, right? So as you said, ideal would be just try to get in touch with the product managers who own that specific features. Sometimes there are features that are orphaned, nobody owns a specific feature. It was built a while ago. It exists, but there isn't as much maintenance work being done on that specific feature. And you as an organization have not decided to kill that feature yet. So that presents an opportunity for you to take that on and say like, okay, I've identified this feature. I don't think there's anybody in the organization who actually actively maintains this feature, and I think there is an opportunity here. So that actually could be a really good way for you to say like you'd work on a specific feature that doesn't exist and build a hypothesis, a business case around it, and how you can use it. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Chandrika.
Hi, Chandrika. This is Ekta here. I
Ekta.
just wanted to. Hi. So I just had a small question regarding. You said if all of a sudden the demand increases and you have to be prepared for that, how would you handle such a scenario? Scalability.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting scenario, and a lot of folks, have found themselves in this situation during the pandemic, especially because um, companies that facilitate remote work or make it easier have found themselves in that situation, especially, right? At DocuSign, we definitely face that because our product usage spiked beyond what we had planned for. And I think at that point, there's this concept of a peacetime PM and a wartime PM. It's beautifully, defined in this book that I would highly recommend you check out. It's called Hard Things About Hard Things, and it's by this author called Ben Horowitz. So definitely check that out. But the idea is that as a wartime PM, you have to make some decisions pretty quickly, and you have to think about what is the most important. What is the most important workflow that exists in your product that you have to absolutely protect at any cost, and that part of your product cannot go down, and maybe for a period of time you degrade the user experience a little bit by taking away some of those vanity features or features that are nice to have but not must haves, right? And you maybe switch those features off for a little bit, degrade the user experience a little bit, but it helps you buy that time to prepare for that capacity planning that you need in order to plan for the additional load that you're experiencing during times like these. Does that answer your question, Ekta?
Yes, Chandrika, thanks. And second and last question is that we have come across the concept of AI product manager or versus product manager. So in both these cases, like how much technical knowledge is needed?
In you said AI product manager?
Yeah, versus a normal current like product manager role.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is a whole separate session. I know there was someone who presented um, at Pragmatic Leaders itself, in fact, a few weeks ago or a few months ago, I would say, about how to think about being an AI product manager. I obviously haven't been an AI product manager, so I wouldn't be able to like comment quite well on that. But what I can tell you is that in most product roles, I would say you have to be technically fluent. Like you need to understand uh, terms to be able to have conversations with your tech team, engineering team, developers, etc. You need to be able to be tech fluent and not necessarily know how to build products yourselves or code yourselves. So as long as you have basic knowledge of how things function, and there's a ton of resources out there, you can watch YouTube videos to even get an understanding of how things work in your specific context. So I would say making sure that you understand the different terms, different things that are being used in your development process really well is important, but it doesn't necessarily. I personally feel that it's not necessary to have a technical background.
So in the concept of when you said we have to take care of scalability, do in that sense, do we need to have a basic understanding of the architecture also?
It would be helpful for sure. Like if you have an understanding of, the tech architecture, if you have opinions on architectural design, I think it's always helpful to be able to in some cases, challenge the strategy that your team's going with in case you think there's a better one out there. But again, especially as someone who's starting out in a product management role, I wouldn't expect you to have that knowledge from the get-go. It's something that you probably develop over time, but in my opinion, and again, this is very context specific, it depends. If you're a platforms PM, for example, you have to have that knowledge beforehand because you're brought in to do work like that. But if you're more of a product manager uh, on the growth side, business side, typically that's not something that you would expect from the get-go.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks, Chandrika. I think we can wind up the session here. We might have a lot of other questions coming in, but we can take all of these questions over Slack later. I am sharing link of uh, the community, our YouTube channel, and website in chat section. So you can go. You all
Thanks so
can
much
go and
for organizing this. And if there's any more questions, I'm fairly active on Twitter, so you can find me at Chandrika633. I can answer some of the questions there. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like, and hopefully I can help answer some of the questions you have. I hope you found this session helpful, and I really enjoyed speaking to all of you and taking some questions. And thanks again, Piyush, for organizing this.
thanks a lot. And everyone, link of this session I'll share in the newsletter. This session is recorded and it will be published on our YouTube channel. And we have a lot more such amazing sessions coming ahead. So you can join our Slack community to stay updated with all of such sessions. And thanks a lot once again.